The year was 1970, and the streets of Los Angeles buzzed with excitement as a towering figure walked confidently through the bustling city. Arnold Schwarzenegger, fresh from his Mr. Universe victory, had already begun turning heads in America. But it wasn't just his massive physique that made him stand out. It was the fire in his eyes and the determination in his steps that truly set him apart. At just 23 years old, Arnold had already achieved what many considered impossible. Coming from a small village in Austria, he had conquered the world of bodybuilding. However, the young man's ambitions stretched far beyond the gym walls. While others saw him as just another muscle-bound athlete, Arnold had been quietly studying the American real estate market, recognizing it as his ticket to lasting success. Every morning, Arnold would wake up at 5 a.m., hitting the gym for his intensive training sessions. But what many didn't know was that after his workouts, he would spend hours at the local library, poring over real estate magazines, property laws, and investment strategies. His broken English didn't stop him from absorbing every piece of information he could find. Joe Gold, the owner of Gold's Gym where Arnold trained, would often find him sitting in a corner between sets, reading the Wall Street Journal or real estate guides. "What are you doing, Arnold?" Joe would ask, somewhat amused. Arnold would look up with a serious expression and say in his thick Austrian accent, "I'm building my empire, Joe, one page at a time." His first real estate venture came from his savings as a bricklayer and his competition winnings. While other bodybuilders spent their money on fancy cars and clothes, Arnold lived frugally in a small apartment, saving every dollar he could. He had his eyes set on a small apartment building in Santa Monica, which most investors had overlooked due to its rundown condition. The local real estate agents didn't take him seriously at first. They saw his massive frame squeezed into a borrowed suit that was slightly too small, heard his thick accent, and assumed he was just another dreamer. Little did they know that behind that accent was a mind like a steel trap, memorizing every detail of property values, market trends, and legal requirements. One particular afternoon, Arnold walked into the office of Mike Bennett, a veteran real estate agent known for his skepticism towards newcomers. As Arnold laid out his business plan, complete with detailed financial projections and renovation estimates, Bennett's expression changed from dismissive to intrigued. Here was someone who had done his homework. "You know, kid," Bennett said, leaning back in his chair, "most people come in here talking big but knowing nothing. You're different. You've actually studied this stuff." Arnold smiled, pulling out more documents from his briefcase. "In Austria," he replied, "we have a saying, preparation is half the victory." The deal for the Santa Monica apartment building went through. That was just the beginning. Arnold threw himself into the renovation work, often helping with the physical labor between his movie auditions and gym sessions. He would personally inspect every repair, negotiate with contractors, and even help with the painting when needed. Word started spreading in the local real estate community about this unusual investor, a bodybuilder who could quote property laws as easily as he could lift weights. Some laughed at first, but Arnold didn't mind. He knew that every smirk and dismissive comment would make his eventual success even sweeter. What none of them realized was that Arnold was meticulously documenting every transaction, keeping detailed records of every conversation, and studying the legal aspects of property ownership at night. He understood that in America, knowledge was power, and he was arming himself with as much knowledge as he could acquire. As the sun set over Los Angeles that evening in 1970, Arnold stood in front of his first property investment, keys in hand. He had no idea that in just a few months, this very investment would lead him into a courtroom where everyone, including the judge, would underestimate him. But for now, he was content, knowing that he had taken the first step toward his American dream. Looking up at the building, Arnold smiled to himself. In his pocket was a small notebook, filled with legal terms he was learning, property calculations, and future investment plans. This was just the beginning, and he was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The young Austrian immigrant might have been known for his muscles, but soon, very soon, he would be known for something far more impressive: his brilliant mind. 6 months after purchasing his first apartment building, Arnold Schwarzenegger found himself facing his first major challenge in the American real estate world. It started with a certified letter that arrived at his small office one morning. The previous owner of the building, Thomas Richardson, was claiming that Arnold had violated the terms of their sale agreement. The issue centered around the building's parking lot. Richardson claimed that Arnold had no right to renovate and expand it, stating that the sale agreement had specific restrictions about modifying the property's external features. What Richardson didn't know was that Arnold had spent weeks studying the property's documentation before making any changes. The situation quickly escalated when Richardson's high-powered lawyer, James Morrison, began sending threatening letters. Morrison was well known in Los Angeles legal circles for intimidating inexperienced property owners into quick settlements. He had a particular talent for targeting foreign investors who might not fully understand American legal systems. Mr. Schwarzenegger, Morrison's latest letter read, "Your unauthorized modifications to the property constitute a clear breach of contract. We demand immediate restoration of the original parking layout and compensation for damages." The letter went on to suggest a settlement amount that would have wiped out most of Arnold's savings. Arnold sat in his office, reading the letter for the third time. His friend Franco Columbu, another bodybuilder, watched with concern. "Maybe you should just pay them, Arnold," Franco suggested. "These American lawyers, they can make big problems." But Arnold just smiled, pulling out a thick folder from his filing cabinet. "No, Franco," he replied, his accent thick, but his voice confident. "I've been waiting for something like this. Remember all those nights I spent reading law books instead of going to parties? This is why." Inside the folder were detailed photographs of the property before renovation, copies of local building codes, and most importantly, the complete sale agreement with all its attachments. What Morrison and Richardson hadn't realized was that Arnold had discovered an important detail in the property's historical documents. The original parking lot plans from 1952 showed a larger layout that matched exactly what Arnold had restored. He wasn't expanding the parking lot. He was returning it to its original approved design. As the tension built, Arnold received calls from several other property investors who had faced similar challenges from Richardson. It seemed the former owner had a habit of trying to control his sold properties through legal intimidation. Most previous owners had simply paid up to avoid the hassle of a court battle. Morrison's law firm scheduled a preliminary hearing, expecting to face a nervous bodybuilder who would crumble under legal pressure. They filed a thick stack of motions and legal documents, using complex language that would confuse even native English speakers. The strategy was clear: overwhelm the immigrant investor with legal jargon until he gave up. Arnold spent the next few weeks preparing for the hearing. Every night, after his training sessions, he would meet with a paralegal friend who helped him understand every detail of property law related to his case. He practiced speaking about legal concepts until he could explain them clearly, despite his accent. The day before the hearing, Arnold received one final chance to settle. Morrison's office called with a generous offer to drop the case if Arnold would pay a smaller sum and agree to return the parking lot to its smaller size. The lawyer on the phone spoke slowly, as if talking to someone who barely understood English. Arnold listened politely to the offer, then responded with a calm confidence that caught the lawyer off guard. "Thank you for the offer," he said, "but I look forward to discussing this matter in court tomorrow. I believe the judge will find the original property documents very interesting." That evening, as Arnold prepared his documents for court, he felt a strange sense of excitement. Tomorrow would be more than just a legal hearing. It would be his chance to show that he was more than just a bodybuilder with big dreams. He had done his homework, prepared meticulously, and was ready to face whatever the American legal system threw at him. What no one in the courtroom would expect was that this muscular immigrant with the funny accent was about to teach them all a lesson about the danger of judging a book by its cover. The stage was set for one of the most surprising legal confrontations in Los Angeles real estate history. The morning of the hearing arrived with a tense atmosphere in the Los Angeles County Courthouse. Arnold Schwarzenegger walked into courtroom 304, wearing a perfectly tailored dark blue suit that made him look more like a businessman than a bodybuilder. The courtroom was unusually crowded. Word had spread about the muscleman investor, facing off against one of the city's most aggressive property lawyers. Judge Howard Peterson, a man known for his sharp wit and sometimes cruel humor, sat on the bench looking down at his papers. As Arnold made his way to his position, the judge glanced up and couldn't hide his amused smile. The sight of the massive Austrian standing at the defendant's table seemed to trigger something in the judge's sense of humor. Well, Judge Peterson began, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "I see Mr. Universe has decided to grace us with his presence." Tell me, Mr. Schwarzen. He deliberately stumbled over the name, causing several people in the courtroom to snicker. Do they have property laws in Austria, or is everything settled with weightlifting competitions? The courtroom erupted in muffled laughter. Morrison, the opposing lawyer, didn't even try to hide his smirk. He had dealt with many foreign investors before, but none quite as unique as this one. He was already imagining how easily he would win this case. Arnold stood calmly, his face showing no reaction to the judge's mocking. Your Honor, he replied clearly, it's pronounced Schwarzenegger. And yes, we do have property laws in Austria. In fact, some of them date back to the Habsburg Empire. The judge raised his eyebrows, clearly not expecting such a composed response. Very well, Mr. Schwarzenegger, he continued, still maintaining his condescending tone. Please explain to the court why you thought it appropriate to modify property without proper authorization. As Arnold began to reach for his documents, the judge interrupted again. And please, he added with a smirk, try to use words bigger than those you find in a fitness magazine. More laughter followed, and Morrison looked increasingly confident. What happened next would be talked about in the Los Angeles legal community for years to come. Arnold pulled out a neatly organized binder and began speaking in a clear, measured voice. Your Honor, I would like to direct the court's attention to the original property plans from 1952, filed under permit number 52447B. The judge's smile began to fade slightly as Arnold continued. These plans, which I've included as Exhibit A, clearly show the parking lot's original dimensions. If you'll notice the surveyor's marks on page 3, Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his chair as Arnold methodically laid out his case. The young Austrian wasn't just citing documents, he was explaining complex zoning regulations and property codes with surprising expertise. Judge Peterson's expression gradually changed from amusement to confusion, then to genuine interest. He found himself leaning forward, following Arnold's logical presentation of evidence. The mocking smile was completely gone now, replaced by a look of growing respect. Even when Arnold's accent made certain legal terms sound different, his understanding of the concepts was unmistakable. He referenced specific cases, quoted municipal codes, and explained the historical context of the property's development with remarkable clarity. The courtroom's atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The same people who had been laughing at the judge's jokes were now watching in amazement as the muscle-bound foreigner delivered a masterclass in property law defense. Halfway through Arnold's presentation, Judge Peterson held up his hand. Mr. Schwarzenegger, he interrupted, his tone now completely serious, I must admit I'm rather impressed by your preparation. This is not what I expected. Arnold nodded respectfully. Thank you, Your Honor. As we say in bodybuilding, the real work happens in preparation, not in performance. This time, when laughter rippled through the courtroom, it was appreciative rather than mocking. The judge sat back in his chair, a thoughtful look replacing his earlier condescension. He glanced at Morrison, who was frantically flipping through his own documents, clearly unprepared for such a knowledgeable opponent. As the hearing continued, it became increasingly clear that this would not be the simple case everyone had expected. The muscular Austrian immigrant standing before them had done something remarkable. He had turned the tables on those who underestimated him, and he had done it not with his physical strength, but with the power of his mind. What the judge and Morrison didn't know was the incredible journey of preparation that had led to this moment. While everyone saw Arnold training at Gold's Gym during the day, few knew about his late-night study sessions that had begun months before he even bought the property. Every night, after the gym closed at 10 p.m., Arnold would drive to a small apartment where his friend, David Chen, a law student at UCLA, lived. David had initially been skeptical when the massive bodybuilder approached him asking for help understanding property law. However, Arnold's determination quickly won him over. Show me everything, Arnold had told David during their first meeting. I want to know every detail about property law, every trick these lawyers might use against me. David would later recall how Arnold would sit for hours, filling notebook after notebook with careful notes, often staying until 2 or 3 in the morning. The preparation went beyond just studying law books. Arnold had created a detailed system of documentation for every aspect of his property business. In a small room of his apartment, he had installed a filing cabinet with color-coded folders. Every conversation, every repair, Every decision was meticulously recorded and photographed. Even his English lessons had taken on a legal focus. Arnold hired Sarah Thompson, an English teacher specializing in business language, to help him master legal terminology. They would spend hours practicing the pronunciation of complex legal terms until Arnold could say them clearly, despite his accent. Most people give up after an hour, Sarah would later tell their colleagues. But Arnold, he would repeat the single phrase 50 times if necessary. He said he needed to be able to say these words in his sleep. His dedication was so intense that Sarah started calling him the legal Terminator. The real secret weapon in Arnold's preparation was his network of experts. Besides David and Sarah, he had befriended Bob Martinez, a retired building inspector who taught him everything about local building codes and regulations. Bob was impressed by Arnold's ability to memorize complex regulatory details and his insistence on understanding the reasoning behind each rule. During his training sessions at Gold's Gym, Arnold would often listen to recordings of legal lectures while doing his repetitions. Other bodybuilders would laugh, but he didn't care. He had learned early in his bodybuilding career that success came from preparation, and he applied this same principle to his legal battle. One particular night, about 2 months before the court case, Arnold had a breakthrough. While reviewing old property records at the city archive, where he had befriended the night clerk, he discovered the original 1952 plans for the parking lot. This document would become the cornerstone of his defense, but finding it was no accident. It was the result of countless hours spent digging through dusty files. Arnold also prepared physically for the courtroom. He practiced standing for hours in a suit, worked on controlling his facial expressions in a mirror, and even had David conduct mock court sessions where he would face hostile questioning. They would videotape these sessions, with Arnold studying his responses and body language afterward. The preparation extended to his appearance as well. Arnold understood that presentation mattered in court. He had his suit custom-made to de-emphasize his muscular build, chose conservative ties, and even practiced a slightly softer version of his voice that would work better in the courtroom's acoustics. What made his preparation truly exceptional was his attention to his opponent's background. Arnold had researched everything about Morrison's previous cases, his typical strategies, and even his habits in court. He knew Morrison had a pattern of trying to intimidate foreign property owners, and he prepared specifically to counter this approach. On the evening before the court hearing, Arnold sat in his apartment reviewing his notes one final time. The table was covered with documents, each one carefully highlighted and annotated. His friend Franco dropped by and was amazed by the scene. "Arnold," Franco said, "I'd never seen anyone prepare like this for a court case." Arnold looked up from his notes and smiled. "Franco, remember what I always say about bodybuilding competitions. The battle is won or lost long before you ever step on stage. This courtroom battle, I've already been fighting it for months. Tomorrow is just the performance." As he organized his documents for the next day, Arnold felt a calm confidence. He knew he had done everything possible to prepare. While others might see him as just another immigrant bodybuilder, he was about to show them the power of relentless preparation and unwavering determination. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted dramatically as Arnold moved into the core of his defense presentation. Judge Peterson, who had started the day mocking the muscular foreigner, was now leaning forward intently, his earlier smugness replaced by genuine interest. "Your Honor," Arnold continued, pulling out a large envelope, "I would like to present Exhibit C, which contains the complete photographic documentation of the parking lot's condition from 1952 to the present day." He handed the documents to the court clerk, who distributed them to Morrison and the judge. Morrison, who had been smirking throughout the morning, suddenly sat up straighter. The photographs were meticulously organized, with dates, timestamps, and notarized authentications. Each image told part of a story that directly contradicted his client's claims. "As you can see," Arnold explained, his accent still thick, but his legal terminology precise. "The original parking lot dimensions from 1952 match exactly what we restored. We didn't expand the parking lot, we simply returned it to its original approved size." Judge Peterson removed his glasses, studying the photos carefully. "Mr. Schwarzenegger," he interrupted, "where did you obtain these historical photographs?" "City Archives, Your Honor. I spent 3 months researching the property's history." Each photograph has been verified by the city planning office, as noted in the authentication documents attached to each image. Morrison stood up quickly. Objection, Your Honor. These documents weren't included in the initial discovery phase. Arnold calmly reached for another folder. If you'll check page 47 of our initial filing, Mr. Morrison, you'll find these documents were listed in the appendix. We also sent your office 2 separate notices requesting a review of this evidence. I have the certified mail receipts right here. The judge looked at Morrison, who fumbled through his papers, clearly caught off guard. The confident lawyer was beginning to look increasingly uncomfortable. But Arnold wasn't finished. He proceeded to pull out the original building permits from 1952, complete with detailed surveyor's notes. These documents show that the current parking lot configuration not only matches the original plans, but actually improves safety by allowing better emergency vehicle access. As Arnold spoke, several people in the courtroom gallery began whispering to each other. They had come expecting to see a Musselman stumble through legal proceedings, but instead were watching a masterclass in property law defense. Judge Peterson, now completely engaged, began asking detailed questions about zoning regulations and building codes. To everyone's amazement, Arnold answered each query with precision, often citing specific ordinances and previous case laws. In the case of Thompson v. Los Angeles County, 1968, Arnold noted, the court established that restoration to original specifications doesn't constitute modification under city building codes. He paused, then added, I believe Your Honor is familiar with that case, as you were the presiding judge. The judge's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Not only did this bodybuilder know the law, but he had also researched the judge's own legal history. Morrison, trying to regain control, stood up again. Your Honor, my client maintains that regardless of historical documentation, the current modifications violate our sale agreement. Arnold calmly pulled out yet another document. Section 7.3 of the sale agreement, which I've highlighted, specifically states that restoration to original specifications is permitted without additional authorization. Mr. Richardson signed this agreement himself. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Peterson reviewed the document. The judge's earlier condescending attitude had completely vanished, replaced by an expression of growing respect. Furthermore, Arnold continued, I have statements from 3 licensed surveyors confirming that our work exactly matches the original 1952 specifications. Their notarized reports are included as Exhibit D. As Arnold organized his next set of documents, he caught a glimpse of Morrison frantically whispering to his assistant. The high-powered lawyer's strategy of intimidating the foreign investor was crumbling with each passing minute. Judge Peterson, now fully invested in the proceedings, held up one of the photographs. Mr. Schwarzenegger, your attention to detail is remarkable. I must admit, I've rarely seen such thorough documentation in a property dispute case. The turning point was clear to everyone in the courtroom. What had started as a seemingly simple case against a foreign bodybuilder had transformed into a sophisticated legal battle, with Arnold proving himself more than capable of defending his rights in the American legal system. As the hearing entered its crucial phase, Arnold moved to present what would become the most devastating part of his defense. He pulled out a thick leather-bound folder that contained something no one in the would like to demonstrate. What Arnold revealed next stunned the courtroom. He had discovered that Richardson had filed similar complaints against 7 other property buyers in the past 5 years. In each case, he had claimed violations of sale agreements regarding property modifications, and in each case, he had demanded substantial settlements. As you can see from these court records, Arnold continued, pointing to specific pages, Mr. Richardson has made a practice of selling properties with deliberately vague contract terms, then threatening legal action when new owners attempt any improvements. Judge Peterson leaned forward, clearly intrigued. Mr. Schwarzenegger, how did you obtain this information? Public records, Your Honor. I spent weeks at the county clerk's office reviewing every property transaction and legal filing connected to Mr. Richardson. What's particularly interesting is the timing of these complaints, always filed 6 to 8 months after the sale, just when new owners have invested in improvements. Morrison jumped to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Schwarzenegger is trying to prejudice the court with irrelevant historical information. Arnold calmly reached for another document. With respect, Your Honor, The California Property Code Section 423.7 specifically allows for the introduction of evidence showing patterns of similar business practices when fraud might be involved. The judge nodded slowly, impressed by the precise legal citation. Objection overruled. Please continue, Mr. Schwarzenegger. Arnold then produced a series of architectural drawings, each carefully annotated. These plans show that every modification we made to the parking lot was not only consistent with the original 1952 design, but also improved safety and accessibility. We actually consulted with 3 different architectural firms to ensure compliance. He proceeded to show time-stamped photographs of the construction process, along with signed statements from contractors and city inspectors. Each document was perfectly organized, numbered, and cross-referenced. Furthermore, Arnold continued, pulling out yet another folder. We have written correspondence from Mr. Richardson's own architect from 1968, recommending these exact same modifications to the parking lot. It seems Mr. Richardson was well aware that these changes were necessary for safety reasons. Morrison's face had turned pale. His client had never mentioned the existence of these documents, and now his entire case was unraveling. Arnold then delivered his masterstroke. He presented a series of emails between Richardson and his previous attorney, obtained through legal discovery, discussing their strategy of targeting foreign investors who might be intimidated by the American legal system. Your Honor, Arnold said, his accent now carrying a note of authority, these documents show that Mr. Richardson specifically waited until after I had invested in property improvements before filing his complaint, following the same pattern he used with other foreign investors. The judge studied the emails carefully, his expression growing increasingly serious. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, captivated by the thorough dismantling of Richardson's case. In conclusion, Arnold stated, standing tall in his perfectly fitted suit, not only were our modifications legal and proper, but they were also necessary for safety compliance. Mr. Richardson's complaint is not about property rights. It's about attempting to exploit foreign investors through legal intimidation. He then pulled out one final document, a petition signed by 5 previous property buyers who had faced similar claims from Richardson, all willing to testify about their experiences. The courtroom was silent. Judge Peterson looked from the documents to Arnold, then to Morrison, who was frantically whispering with his assistants. The transformation was complete. The bodybuilder who had been mocked at the beginning of the hearing had revealed himself to be a legal strategist of remarkable skill. Mr. Morrison, the judge said finally, do you have any response to this rather comprehensive presentation? Morrison stood, adjusted his tie nervously, and said, Your Honor, we request a brief recess to review these materials. The judge nodded, but his eyes remained on Arnold, who was calmly organizing his documents. It was clear to everyone present that this was no longer just a simple property dispute. It had become a masterclass in legal preparation and presentation. After a brief recess, Judge Peterson returned to the courtroom with a markedly different demeanor. The mocking smile that had characterized the morning session was replaced by an expression of genuine respect. He settled into his chair and cleared his throat, preparing to address the court. Before we continue, the judge began, removing his glasses and looking directly at Arnold. I feel compelled to make a statement. In my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely witnessed such thorough preparation and presentation of evidence. The courtroom fell silent. Even the usual shuffling of papers ceased as all eyes focused on the judge. Morrison sat stiffly in his chair, knowing what was coming. Mr. Schwarzenegger, Judge Peterson continued, I owe you an apology. When you walked into my courtroom this morning, I made assumptions based on your appearance and background. Those assumptions were not only unprofessional but entirely wrong. Arnold nodded respectfully, maintaining the same calm composure he had shown throughout the proceedings. The judge wasn't finished. What we witnessed today goes beyond just good legal defense. You've demonstrated an understanding of property law that would impress even seasoned attorneys. More importantly, you've exposed what appears to be a pattern of predatory legal practices targeting foreign investors. The judge picked up one of the documents Arnold had presented. These records you've compiled, the historical documentation, the pattern analysis, the cross-referenced exhibits, this is exceptional work. How long did you spend preparing this case? 6 months, Your Honor, Arnold replied. I studied every night after my training sessions, sometimes until 2 or 3 in the morning. Judge Peterson shook his head in amazement. 6 months. While running a business and maintaining your athletic career. That's remarkable dedication. The judge then turned his attention to Morrison and his client, Richardson, who had been squirming uncomfortably in his seat. Mr. Richardson, the evidence presented today raises serious concerns about your business practices. I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for review. Richardson's face turned pale. This was no longer about winning or losing the case. His entire business model was now under scrutiny. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm issuing a court order requiring you to provide full documentation of all your property transactions from the past 10 years. Mr. Schwarzenegger's research suggests a pattern that warrants investigation. The judge then did something unprecedented. He stepped down from the bench and approached Arnold, extending his hand. Mr. Schwarzenegger, I want to thank you. Your preparation and presentation today have reminded me of an important lesson. Never judge a book by its cover. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the judge shook Arnold's hand. Several attorneys who had come to watch the proceedings were frantically taking notes, impressed by the thoroughness of the defense. Your Honor, Arnold said, his accent thick but his words clear. In Austria, we have a saying, the mind is like a muscle, it grows stronger with exercise. I simply applied the same discipline I use in bodybuilding to studying law. Judge Peterson smiled, genuinely this time. Well, Mr. Schwarzenegger, you've certainly given everyone in this courtroom a mental workout today. I've seen experienced attorneys with decades of practice who couldn't match the level of preparation you've shown. The judge returned to his bench and addressed the entire courtroom. Let this be a lesson to everyone present. We in the legal profession sometimes become too comfortable with our assumptions. Today, a man who many of us underestimated has demonstrated what true legal preparation looks like. Looking at the young lawyers in the gallery, the judge added, take note, all of you. This is how cases should be prepared. Mr. Schwarzenegger didn't just defend himself, he created a comprehensive legal argument backed by meticulous documentation. As the judge prepared to deliver his final ruling, he paused and looked at Arnold one more time. Mr. Schwarzenegger, regardless of my final decision, you've earned my respect today. You've shown that success in our legal system doesn't depend on where you're from or what you look like. It depends on preparation, dedication, and intelligence. The courtroom remained silent, absorbing the judge's words. What had started as a simple property dispute had transformed into a powerful lesson about prejudice, preparation, and the true nature of justice. Everyone present knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. The day a bodybuilder from Austria taught the Los Angeles legal establishment about excellence in law. Judge Peterson's final ruling came as no surprise to anyone who had witnessed the day's proceedings. Not only did he rule completely in Arnold's favor, but he also took the extraordinary step of ordering Richardson to pay all of Arnold's legal expenses and preparation costs. In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, the judge declared, this court finds no merit whatsoever in the plaintiff's claims. Furthermore, the defendant's modifications to the property are hereby confirmed as both legal and beneficial to public safety. As Arnold gathered his docu, Mr. Schwarzenegger, Carter said, extending his hand, I've been practicing law for 30 years, and I've never seen such a well-prepared defense from a non-attorney. Would you consider joining our firm's real estate division? Arnold smiled politely but shook his head. Thank you, but I have other plans. This was about protecting my investment and showing that you can't intimidate people just because they're foreign. News of the victory spread quickly through Los Angeles's real estate community. By evening, the story of how a bodybuilder had outmaneuvered one of the city's most aggressive property developers was circulating in every law office downtown. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered to hear Arnold's statement. Standing on the steps, his massive frame still impressive in his perfectly tailored suit, he addressed the crowd with characteristic directness. Today shows that the American dream is real, he said, his accent somehow adding weight to his words. In this country, if you work hard and prepare well, you can win fairly, no matter who you are or where you come from. The victory had far-reaching consequences. Within weeks, 3 other foreign investors who had faced similar claims from Richardson came forward. Arnold's meticulous documentation became the template for their defenses, and Richardson's practice of targeting immigrant investors quickly unraveled. Back at Gold's gym that evening, Arnold returned to his regular workout routine. His fellow bodybuilders, who had often teased him about his late-night study sessions, now looked at him with new respect. Joe Gold himself put up a framed newspaper clipping about the case in the gym's office. "You know what the best part is?" Arnold told his friend Franco as they trained. "Now when I look at property contracts, the other party's lawyers don't try any tricks. They know I understand everything they're saying." The case became a turning point in Arnold's business career. Real estate agents and property developers who had previously dismissed him now sought his partnership. His reputation for thorough preparation and legal knowledge opened doors that his bodybuilding titles never could. More importantly, the case established a legal precedent that helped protect other foreign investors from similar predatory practices. The judge's written opinion, which cited Arnold's defense strategy extensively, became required reading in several law school property courses. 1 month after the victory, Arnold received a letter from UCLA Law School. They wanted him to give a guest lecture about his preparation methods and research techniques. The bodybuilder who had once been mocked for his accent was now being asked to teach law students about legal excellence. Sarah Thompson, his English teacher who had helped him master legal terminology, couldn't hide her pride. Arnold showed that with enough determination, you could overcome any obstacle, she told her other students. He turned what others saw as weaknesses, his accent, his background, his appearance, into strengths. The victory changed how the Los Angeles legal community viewed immigrant investors. Law firms began offering specialized services to help foreign business people understand their rights, with several citing the Schwarzenegger defense as a model for thorough legal preparation. Years later, when asked about the case, Arnold would often say it taught him his most valuable lesson about America. In this country, it's not about where you come from or how you look. It's about how hard you're willing to work and how well you prepare. The final chapter of this story came when Richardson's other victims formed a support group, helping foreign investors understand their legal rights. They named it the Schwarzenegger Initiative, focusing on education and legal preparation for immigrant business people. As Arnold drove home that evening after the verdict, he passed by his apartment building, the property that had started it all. The parking lot, now properly restored to its original specifications, stood as a symbol of his victory. But more than that, it represented something greater, proof that in America, justice was truly blind to appearance, accent, or origin. All it required was preparation, determination, and the courage to stand up for what's right.